Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is on hauntings and the paranormal. Joining me today is ZakBabyTV. Make sure you go sub to him if you like his narrations. His link will be in the description. I hope you all enjoy this video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. So I've never really talked about this, but it all started 3 years ago when I was talking to this girl for a little bit. Her name was Natalie. She lived in an older house and had the entire basement to herself. I remember her saying things like how her house was haunted. I didn't really believe her until this one night. So me and my friend Nick are spending the night at her house, and I remember my friend laying down on the couch at like 9:30, and he was just staring blankly at the wall. I didn't think anything was wrong, and I thought he was just messing around, so I started calling his name. Yo, Nick. 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 Nothing I said could get a response from him. Meanwhile, I was across the room, and Natalie was sitting on her bed. After about a minute of him just staring blankly, he jumps off the couch and says, "I don't mess with that. I don't mess with that." Freaking out, and Natalie started laughing. It didn't really dawn on me until later that I think she knew what was happening. Anyways, I started laughing too, thinking it was a joke. About 5 minutes pass, and he calms down and sits back on the couch. This is where things get a little creepy and interesting. She had a screen door in her room that opened outside. I specifically remember as soon as I took 2 steps out of her room, every single light in her room, including outlets, all blew out and it was pitch black. It got really creepy for a second. We tried everything, and the only thing in her room that would work was a lamp next to the couch, right next to Nick's head. Anyways, this was all kind of new to me, and I didn't really know what to think about the situation. I then remembered things getting weird in the room, like Natalie was getting super agitated over the littlest things and wouldn't let me sleep in her bed. So I was like, whatever, I'll just sleep on the floor at the foot of her bed. I remember I couldn't fall asleep that night. I was laying there for a while everyone else was asleep when I had this sleep paralysis type of feeling. I couldn't move or anything. I remember this happened to me once when I was young, and all I could think to do was to pray and start saying the Our Father prayer in my head. When about halfway through it, it stopped and I just tried to go back to bed. About 30 seconds pass and it hits me again that I can't move. This is giving me chills as I type this. So I start praying again, and halfway through the prayers, it stops. At this point I was like, whatever this is gone, until about 30 seconds pass again, and this time it's much more frightening. I remember it felt like someone plunged me onto an outlet, like I was being shocked through my whole body, and I was kind of shaking or whatever. It was just holding me down. I remember trying to move my arms as hard as I could to rip the blanket off of Nick to wake him up and help me, but in my head, I was saying Our Fathers, and it left halfway through again. At this point I was freaking out. I was literally scared for the next few months after this, and I slept in the same room as my mom for a month or so. It took me a while to kind of make sense of what happened that night, but I think some entity or demon or something, I don't know, tried messing with my friend Nick, and when I laughed and taunted it, it targeted me. But this story is not over. So this happened about 2 years ago when I moved into my new house, which I still live in today. I remember my aunt was visiting, and it was late night around 2 a.m. I was just chilling playing video games, doing my thing when I hear a weird sound to my left and right. I had my gaming headset on, so I ignored it and kept playing. When I thought I heard the same sound for the second time from behind my bed, I took my headset off and waited, trying to hear it again to find out what it was. I sat there for like 2 minutes, just waiting, when I heard the sound right next to me. Woo. It's literally all I could make out, and it was just weird and creeped me the fuck out. So I ran to my mom's room and told her something was making sounds in my room, and she was like, "Oh, it's probably the sprinkler system or some other shit outside," and went outside to look. I remember I walked back into the hall to my room and stood there waiting for my mom to come back inside, when I literally heard the loudest woo in my ear. I ran out of the house crying and freaking out, and my mom thought I was crazy. I remember hearing a voice another time while I was trying to sleep, and I just kept telling it to go away. Since then I haven't heard any other crazy shit, though I do get sleep paralysis sometimes. The most recent experience, I had what was like a presence of a woman in my room, and I couldn't move. I don't know, all this stuff is just kind of creepy to me. When I was younger in the 60s, we lived in an old house built before the Civil War. It was up in Oldham County, Kentucky, in an area known as the Devil's Backbone, on Dawkins Road. I was around 12 years old and had an encounter I would never forget. One night, I was unable to sleep and I was laying on my side when I got this very uncomfortable feeling. I turned on my back and saw a young man with dark hair and a mustache staring at me from the foot of my bed. He was wearing clothing from the 1800s. I looked at him for a while before I lost my nerve and ducked under the covers. When I looked back up, he was gone. Several weeks later, I was upstairs in my brother's room and I was home alone. Suddenly, someone loudly ran up the stairs to the door. I opened it only to find a cold breeze. I left the house until everyone else came home. Sometime later, I was in town with my dad. We met an old man that said he lived in the house when he was a boy. He said the house was haunted and that a young musician hung himself from the second-story window, which was my brother's room. I'm a water treatment plant operator. Been doing this for about a decade. I've been the night shift guy my whole career. The nights are normally quiet and can be boring if everything is going as planned. My plant has a few different buildings. The oldest is 60 or so years old. The main building is where I spend a majority of my night shifts, and is only roughly 20 years old. For more backstory of the area, this used to be a booming, energized area. This area was littered with railroad tracks and drifters coming and going on the trains. Our farms and factories were very bountiful back then. Now that you all understand that with success in the area, there's also a darkness. From the settling of the area, wars with natives, and even into the 30s and 40s of people being killed on train wrecks and bad business deals, the grounds are laced with darkness. The silence of night shifts can be eerie all on its own. Lots of bumps and bangs in the dim lit darkness. On the night that I'm about to speak about, everything started as normal. I came around sunset, got the nightly Passover, and began my work. Around midnight, I had to do my rounds around the whole property while getting the nightly pump numbers. I made my rounds with nothing but a flashlight around the main building. The oldest building is a good walking distance away from the main building. I set out in the darkness, heading for that building. I must also add that we aren't in the nicest area of the town. However, I'm a big guy and I can hold my own. As I made my walk, I got an uneasy feeling. I've gotten this before, but I have a job to do and nothing came of it. I rounded the corner and unlocked the door. As I did this, the hairs on my back and neck stood up. Again, I have a job to do though. I opened the door and there stood nothing. I walked in and proceeded to get my numbers. As I turned to shut the door, I looked down the hallway to see a woman in pure white looking at me through the other door. I almost jumped out of my boots and pissed myself a little. As I came back to reality, I once again made eye contact with this entity. As soon as I met her gaze, everything in me said, "Hey, your life is in danger, buddy." Her face was distorted and started to shift around. I was now frozen as she shifted into what looked like an Indian warrior. His eyes were glowing. As I got to my feet, he shifted into a huge wolf creature. The growls were chilling to say the least. It snarled, then ran towards me. I didn't even have time to shut the door. I ran as fast as I could, screaming bloody murder. I felt as if it was trying to bite my backside. It got a hold of my pant leg and tore it to shreds. I stumbled and rolled, but somehow managed to get back on my feet. I darted to the main building, and as I shut the door, I heard a loud thud on the other side. I locked the doors and cowered inside. I could hear the thing growling and scratching at the walls. I got the courage to look out the window, just to end up face to face with a white lady again. I called the police and had them sit with me until the sun came up. No one else has ever seen the white lady since. It's still quite freaky, but I had a job to do. Please, someone, help us. We don't know what to do. It's getting so bad. It's been bad over the last 20 years, but this is the worst by far. Both of my parents grew up in haunted houses, and of course my siblings and I have all grown up in haunted houses as well. At first my parents thought my brother just had an imaginary friend. His name was Joe and he lived in the closet. My brother woke up screaming in the middle of the night when I was a baby, so I don't remember. My parents ran in there and he had blood all over his sheets and 3 very long cuts on his back. They had bunk beds and my brother was on the bottom. My parents said he was pale and wouldn't say a word. Things calmed down for a really long time until I was 10. I had one of my friends stay over, and we were staying up really late, playing games, and doing what little girls do. We started hearing scratching sounds coming from outside my door. I had a cat, so I thought it was her. So I went to open the door, but there was nothing there. We ended up shrugging it off. Then it started again, and the doorknob started to jiggle, and it slowly opened. There was a dark figure standing there, looking at us. It was out of breath, and its shoulders were going up and down. Then it lunged at us, and we screamed, causing my parents to come in running. Nothing and nobody was in the house. My friend never stayed the night at my house again, and we stopped being friends shortly after. 9 years later, just little things were happening, nothing too scary. My boyfriend went off to basic training, and I still lived with my parents when I was 19. I had a dog, Zeus, who was sleeping on my bed, and he's a yellow lab. It was 6:30 in the morning, and I had to be up at 8:30 for work. He woke me up growling. Then I heard a weird voice in my ear speaking a language I didn't understand. When I started to open my eyes, it started growling in my ears. I opened my eyes fast, and my door slammed. My dog was standing over me, with his hair standing up, looking like he was about to attack someone. Everyone was already at work, and I heard banging coming from my parents' room. I got Zeus off of me, and jumped out of bed, and ran to my parents' room. The cabinets were opening and closing fast, and things were being thrown everywhere, around the room. It wouldn't stop. I turned around and went to run out, but the door slammed shut. My dog was running around the house, barking and growling, and started running into the door. I said screw it, and ran out and grabbed some work clothes and got my dog and got the hell out. I dropped off my dog at my friend's house and went to work early. When I got home, my parents' room was destroyed. My mother was crying and my dad was pissed. I told them everything, and we decided not to talk about it again and went on with the rest of the night. My brother still lived with my parents as well. That night, his door kept opening and closing, and I kept hearing running in the hallway, so I thought it was him. I slipped on my slippers and stomped to his room. I was gonna yell at him to knock off his stupid shit, and when I opened the door, he was snoring. I woke him up and he promised me it wasn't him. He told me to leave his door open to see if anything happens again. I'm halfway down the hallway and my brother yells at me to run to my room and not to look back. But of course, I turn around instead. As I turned around, I see a large black figure standing in the doorway staring at me. It had large red eyes. I froze and started to whimper. My brother, being the protective big brother, came charging out of his room, telling the thing to leave me alone, and then it disappeared. My brother ran to me and led me to my room and slept on the floor all night. I didn't sleep. Now a year later, I'm 21. My husband is away in the army at the moment, and we are waiting for our plumbing to be done at our new house. Last night we had a bad rainstorm. I woke up to growling again and couldn't move. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure with red eyes just staring at me, and it opened its mouth so wide it could fit my whole head in its mouth. It had huge sharp teeth and a long skinny tongue. It screamed in my ear, and my ears started to ring. I wanted to cover them, but I couldn't. My parents come running into my room, covering their ears, but it stopped mid-run when they saw the thing. My dad came running to me and picked me up and carried me to his room, and Zeus followed. I was finally able to move and started shaking uncontrollably. My brother still lives there, as well as his girlfriend. We heard her scream, and then she started banging on the door, and then my dad opened it, and she came running in, crying and shaking. We all started to ask where my brother was. Before she could answer, he came out of his room on his hands and feet with black eyes, just staring at us. We all froze, none of us knew what to do. My brother then popped his neck and started running for us. My dad slammed his door shut and locked it. My brother ran right into it. My mom was screaming for it to get the hell out of the house and just kept repeating this while things were being thrown, then it goes quiet. My dad opens the door and my brother was passed out on the floor with his nose bleeding. When my brother woke up, we told him everything. He didn't remember a thing, but remembers hearing screaming, and then it all went black. Nobody slept last night, and we all called in and are trying to figure this out. Now it's the next night, and it's 11 o'clock. We are hearing growling and scratching through the entire house. We can't do this again. Please help. I will keep you updated as soon as I can. Thank you.
My mother was a single parent of 6, 5 girls and 1 boy. I was the youngest. This took place in Hollywood, California in the late 1960s. She knew her kids were all different. She was very supportive and never wanted to suppress our separate abilities. She would just tell us not to go around telling people because they would think our family was crazy. Looking back at life with my mother, I tend to agree on so many levels. Something she always said stuck with me. People don't like what they can't understand. At the time, we were renting a house on Alexandria, but the owners wanted to move back in, so they wanted us to move. Mom worked day hours, so the only time she could go looking at rentals was at night. All 6 of us would pile into the big yellow wood panel station wagon with the suicide seat in the back, and off we would go. The adventure began in the night. Most of the time, a door was unlocked. This was the 60s. All of us armed with flashlights, but we had to be quiet. The scariest times for me was when the doors were open, so me being the smallest, my brother would help me into the window. Now that I'm saying this, I believe that was breaking and entering. If there was a house that made any one of us uncomfortable, she would scratch it off her list and move on. It was hard to find a house that fit all of us, especially anything my mother could afford. One day, I came home from school and was surprised to see all of our stuff being moved into the house directly across the street from an old evil lady with her windows blacked out lived in the back. I finally found my mother and asked her what was going on. She told me that she got a really good deal she couldn't pass up. Just stay away from that old lady, she would tell me. It was an old 2-story house with wooden floors, 1 bathroom, and 3 bedrooms. It used to be a 4-bedroom, but a small portion in the back of the house was divided to accommodate another renter that was the old lady. I must add that I was young and very small for my age. There was so much room and so much commotion downstairs. My mother was understandably distracted. I asked her why she didn't let me check the house for anything bad first, and she said, "Look, baby, there wasn't any time. It was a really good deal, and I had to take it. Why don't you check it out now?" Feeling very important, I went off to investigate. I went into the kitchen. Big. I went into the dining room. Fancy. And then I started up the stairs. Mom mentioned that there was a bedroom big enough for all my sisters, a place for all my toys in the hall, and a room for my brother, so I was excited to see this. The staircase was enclosed with a door at the bottom. You went up 4 steps to a landing where it turned and then proceeded up from there. I got up to the top step when it felt like 3 cold hands quickly, one after the other, grabbing around my throat with such force. I tried to scream, but the grip was getting tighter. I thought my vocal cords were being crushed. It started forcing me backwards, and I felt like I was going to fall, but it just held me there for what seemed like forever in my mind, my toes teetering on the edge of the top step. I couldn't move. It felt like surges of electricity throughout my body. Then it started guiding me backwards down the steps, fearing at any moment I was going to be thrown. I saw little spurts of my own breath coming from my nose. As it was guiding me down, I could feel only the edge of the steps grazing the tips of my toes while I was trying to kick my feet for any traction. It got me on the landing and up at the wall. It felt like 1,000 weights were pressing against my chest, still hardly touching the floor. I was starting to pass out when I heard a voice in my head say to me,
"You are strong. You have faith."
I saw a white glowing light all around me, and I said the only word that came to my mind. It then lessened its grip ever so slightly, but it was still enough for me to drop to the floor and run down to my mother. "Please, Mom, Please, we can't live here, please." I told her what had happened, but she said it was too late. We had nowhere else to go. More stuff went on there, terrorizing my whole family, and we only lived there for about 6 more months. In the end, we all ended up sleeping together in the living room. Part 2. While I am waiting for validation from my siblings on experiences we shared together, I thought I would tell you another 1 or 2 experiences I had by myself as a child in the house on Alexandria. We all hated that house. My family and I only lasted 6 months there. My brother liked to tinker, take things apart and see how they worked, if you will. He took the time to sometimes share this part of his life with me. I'd like to think that's where I got my inventor's mind and my ability to fix almost anything. He set up a workshop under the stairs in the basement. I sometimes found some of my electric toys being dissected, then put back together on the workbench. One day I was looking for one of my toys and suspected I knew right where to look. But I was too scared to go down into the basement alone, so I took my trusty cat Friska. He will protect me, I thought. I started down the stairs with my cat in my arms. I got almost to the bottom when the lights went out and the door to the house slammed shut. Scared to death, I felt for the railing and started to run back up when I saw something. Normally, you could see the moonlight from under the house through the vents to outside. Something moving was blocking the light out and quickly coming towards me. It almost looked like billowing black smoke from the back of the house. Just then, my loving cat Friska hissed and clawed me to get away. He jumped from my arms and escaped through one of the grates on the other side. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could with my heart pounding out of my chest. I grabbed the door handle and jiggling it back and forth thinking it was stuck. I heard a loud, long exhale behind me followed by the smell of rotten eggs. The door finally opened and I slammed and locked it behind me. When I told my brother, he said that he never felt good down there and he kept the door always locked after that. My family was very involved with the church. We cleaned it every Saturday and helped with all the events and the variety of shows. Funny thing was that our family was so big it felt like we were the variety show. One such day, they were all at church doing something. I don't remember what. I had just arrived home from school and someone, I think it was one of my sisters, was supposed to be there to greet me. Now this event happened in the hall. As you walked through the dining room to the left, you walked into the hall. You turned right, and on the left is the boarded up wall to the tenant's dwelling behind us. That evil old lady. Just thinking about her now gives me the chills. And straight ahead was the bathroom. If you turn left in the hall, you'll see my mom's room that she and I shared together. Next to that, the door to the upstairs, and in the middle, the door to under the house. Well, nobody was there, and I wasn't going to stay in that house alone, so I walked into the hall and sat on the phone bench. For those of you who don't know what that is, it kind of looks like a wooden end table with a padded seat on it so you could talk on the Accord phone. Anyways, earlier I saw my friend's dad's car parked across the street, so I knew he was home. I figured I could just call and just hang out there and just wait for someone to come home. As I am sitting there, I hear crackling coming from upstairs. It must have been one of my siblings, I thought. So I went to the bottom of the stairs and leaned in on one foot. "Who's up there?" The crackling stopped. Thinking they didn't hear me, I yelled again, and this time calling out one of my sister's names. Still nothing. so I sat back on the bench and waited for them to come down. It was quiet, not a sound. Just then, to the right of me, it sounded like someone was pressing their body against the other side of the boarded-up wall listening. Then a muffled, quiet, evil giggle. It felt off, really off. The crackling noise started back up again, now coming from the top of the stairs, followed by an ear-piercing ringing inside my head. Feeling uncomfortable, I picked up the phone not to take my eyes off that staircase. I dialed my friend's number, and before I could even say hello, I could see it as it turned the corner of the staircase. It was huge. It didn't have a human form. There were what looked like hundreds of eyes all over, and it was pulsating red to amber. The deafening sound crackling was coming from it, with sparks flashing all over its form. It was slowly gliding down the stairs, coming towards me. I then heard more prominent laughter, almost like a crackle coming from behind the wall, and I ran. I dropped the phone and I ran straight over to my friend's house until someone came home. Needless to say, I wasn't the only one that was experiencing these things in this home. Shortly after my mom came home, she said, "That's it. We packed our stuff and we got the hell out of Dodge." We ended up staying at a hotel for a couple weeks before we found somewhere else to stay. And ever since then, I've never experienced anything else paranormal. And I hope I never do. I used to live in the Philippines, and the house I lived in was built when the Philippines was being occupied by Japan during World War II. It had two small walkways, one at the side of the house and one at the back of the house. At the corner where the two walkways meet is where my dog's huge wooden doghouse was. I say huge because I could literally go in and sleep in it comfortably, and I was a huge kid at 12 years old. One night, I was told by my uncle to go and feed Casper. I know, right? I'm writing my ghost experience for my dog's name as a popular ghost name, and no, I'm not lying, my dog's name is really Casper. Of course I said yes right away, because I wanted to play with my dog, and so I went. Now Casper is a happy dog, always running around and always happy to see any of my family, but that night was different. While I was walking towards his doghouse, I realized that I didn't hear him barking or running around, so I thought he was at the back walkway, so I just continued towards the doghouse. It was nighttime, around 8 p.m. I stopped halfway through when I noticed that Casper was inside the doghouse. Now this was worrisome, for he always runs out to greet me if he sees me, so I thought maybe something was wrong, like he was sick or whatever, so I quickened my pace to get closer to him. Once I got there, though, he seemed fine. I put down the food next to him and filled up his water bowl, and no reaction whatsoever. Casper just stared towards the back walkway. I got curious, so I looked towards where he was looking at, and what I saw gives me chills when I remember that day. I saw a man just standing there staring at me with a blank expression. He was wearing some type of military uniform and was holding a rifle. I am not a gun expert, so I can't tell you what kind it was. At the tip of the gun, though, it rested a bayonet. What got me focused on it was that it was a bloody bayonet. At that point, I was just frozen. I remember the fear and thinking, this is it. Someone is here and he's gonna kill me. I don't quite remember what made me look away from that bayonet, but when I did, the first thing I noticed was how the man was now missing half of his face. Seeing him only with a half face jolted me out of my frozen state, and I ran for it. I did not care to look back to see if it was following me or not. I even tackled my uncle, who was coming to check on me. I cried so hard when I realized that I was on top of my uncle. He took me inside and waited for me to stop crying. I fell asleep then from crying. The next morning, my uncle talked to me about what had happened, and I told him everything. He was genuinely worried when I finished, because he told me that I was out there in the walkway for an hour, and that was the reason why he was coming to check on me. He also told me that I wasn't the only one to experience such things in this house. I later found out that the uniform the man was wearing was the standard Japanese military uniform at the time of World War II. I appreciate you guys listening to my story. I have other experiences in that house, but this one was by far the craziest. The man drove to the house on Lily Street and stepped onto the raggedy porch. He cringed as the boards creaked loudly beneath his feet. He felt like he was beyond the point of returning to his house without at least looking inside. He wanted to investigate and understand people's desires to have been scared by potentially haunted houses, harboring evil spirits. Although he didn't believe the stories. The door was unlocked. He sauntered in, now standing next to the old staircase. He heard a distant cry from a crow as it soared past the house just before he closed the front door behind him. Or had it closed on its own? He couldn't remember. Slowly, meticulously, the house began reeling him in like a helpless fish until he found himself in a small bedroom. He liked to believe that he walked up the old stairs to the room under his own free will. But that wasn't how he truly felt. It was as though a hand pressed up against his back and pushed him, guiding him up the stairs and down the dark hallway to the room. In the old days, this may have been a delightful guest room for a friend or relative of the house's owner to take up in, stretched out and enjoy the morning view from the window. Now, it was practically a prison cell. The room was cold, which was what made the man gradually tired. He hesitated, sat down on the bed. His eyes became droopy as he wrinkled the plain white sheets that hadn't been touched in so many years. I should head home, he said aloud to nobody. Don't want to spend the night in this dump. He stood up and staggered out of the house. The coldness left his body. There was still some daylight left when he got home. He figured it'd be dark if he went to take a nap now. He considered himself a night person anyways. Also, he felt the need to sleep off the old wretchlessness of the house. He laid down on his bed, wrapped himself in his blue blanket, and dozed off. He woke up and it was indeed nighttime. That was the first thing he noticed before he realized something was wrong. He was cold again. He was not wrapped in his blue blanket. The air felt murky and dusty. The man slowly sat up, rubbed his eyes, and looked down to see that the moon was casting a light over the plain white sheets he was sitting atop. He couldn't muster up a scream. The thousands of thoughts running through his head were too distracting. The loudest, most prominent one was, I never left the house. The door to the old guest room slammed shut. The window shade dropped down. Pitch black. Complete silence. The man's bulging eyes frantically scanned the room. They stopped as soon as he heard a faint creak of a footstep making contact with the floorboards.
When I heard the sound right next to me, woo, 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 woo,